I was born in Niigata. 生まれは新潟で、13歳まで新潟いて. Всем привет, меня зовут Вика, мне 23, и я живу в Японии.
Do you call yourself Japanese?
I say I'm from Japan. I always don't know what to say. なんか日本人よりも日本人って言われる.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I have another guest. This is Victoria. She is a Russian girl, but she's born and raised in Japan. Her parents are both Russian. If you could introduce yourself in English,
Okay.
Japanese, and Russian.
Okay. Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm 23 and I'm a senior at Temple University, Tokyo. Japanese. こんにちは、Victoria です。今大学生で、東京で大学生やってます。Russian. Всем привет, меня зовут Вика, мне 23, и я живу в Японии.
Your English is self-taught, right? And
Yes.
Japanese, you went to a Japanese school growing up your whole life. So,
Yeah.
日本語が一番ベスト.
Best
Where is everything? If you had to rank each language.
Definitely Japanese first. English, I started learning it at high school, so I use it more after high school. So it's more like easy to talk, easy to use for me. But Russian, I was using it from when I was young, but I didn't use it as much compared to English. So I don't know, like
Yeah.
English, Russian?
How often have you been to Russia?
Like once in 2 years to meet our grandparents' friends, our parents' friends. That's it. But now I haven't been there in 6 years. I was born in Niigata. 生まれは新潟で、13歳まで新潟いて、中学校1年生から今まではずっと横浜. It's like half.
So in Niigata until 13 years old. And also your high school, I know you were telling me, was what's called a commercial high school.
Yes.
What does that mean again?
Commercial high school.
Yeah.
It's Shogyo Koko. It's like Shogyo. It's like learning business, accounting. But I didn't do it in that school. It was just commercial high school, but they had an international department. So people who were interested in learning English, learning in a new environment, not like in Japanese traditional schools, they went there. But most of them were Japanese, but some of them were also like me or like mixed, half Japanese. So it was a new experience for me. That's where I learned English a little bit.
I know your mom speaks English.
A little bit, yes.
But up until that point, you were mostly just speaking in Japanese.
Yes.
We want to jump into that because we have a bunch of pictures of your... we have proof that you were living, born and raised here in Japan. Can you explain why your parents even came to Japan?
So it started with my mom. It was 1994. She was a college student in Moscow. She was just accidentally happened to be in Japan as an exchange student. Okay. She wasn't planning on it. It was after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah, collapsed, right?
Collapsed. Yeah, they had more freedom to travel, to live in other countries. So she was like, why not? Not like, oh, she really wanted to go to Japan. No, it's not like that. She was just like, oh, why not?
Your dad was dating her, right? At the time.
So my mom left him in Moscow. They were doing long distance for 4 years until she finished university here. And my dad was like, no, I love her. He was like visiting her in Japan, and they eventually decided to live in Japan because they just loved the country. They weren't planning on staying in Japan for a long time. My mom was a senior in university when they got married. They married in Russia, but my mom was applying for a job and she got the job in Japan. So my dad was like, oh, why not you try that? So they came here to Japan. My mom got a job. She was working, but then my dad also got the job and he worked for a Japanese company for over 20 years.
Still? Now?
Oh, he quit last year, but...
Oh, okay. Yeah. Congrats to him. But wow, what a love story. But anyway, you were born in year 2000, right? This is you right here.
Yeah.
Can you explain this photo, actually?
This is Russian traditional food. Borscht? That's what they called in English, I think. My mom was cooking Russian food and Japanese food. So like I was exposed to both food cultures at home too.
Let's switch to Japanese because this is your childhood story. So we'll talk in Japanese for a little bit about this. But 家庭ではまあ大体ロシア料理と日本の料理どっちも食べてたから。
もうミックスで。
納豆は好きですか？
大好き。
じゃあ日本人、完全日本人の納豆が好きなら。
納豆大好き。
街の人がビクトリアの家族とか見かけたら、なんだろう、日本語で話しかけてた？
英語でやっぱりもうハーフじゃないから多分英語喋れるんだろうなっていうイメージがあって、でもとりあえず英語で話してくれる人が多かったけど、まあ日本語全然できるからって言うともうやばみたいな。やっぱり私妹もいるんだけど、英語になっちゃう妹どっちももうすごいロシア人っぽい顔で2人とも日本語ペラペラ喋ってると、すごいびっくりされてた。スーパーとかで妹とすごい日本語で会話しててびっくりされてたのとか覚えてる。すごいおばあちゃんとかがなんかみたいな。
信じられないような顔でし。これは妹さん？
妹も、なんかもっとロシア人っぽい感じ。肌白くて、目青くて、全然似てない。
あと、ミラ・ジョヴォヴィッチとか、そういうミランダ・カーにちょっと似てるかもしれない。これはなんだ？これは
小学校かな。小学校の運動会でソーラン節、伝統的な踊り、日本のみんな運動会とかで踊ったりとか。
And this was like also 日本の小学校だよね。
入学式で。
I'm going to switch back to English because subtitles are hard to do. But your teachers and things like that, or your classmates, did they treat you like any other Japanese kid, or did they call you like gaijin, or was it a big deal or not really?
It wasn't a big deal for me because back then when I was in elementary school, we were living in a small town in Niigata. So I grew up with the same kids. So it was like atarimae. They didn't question about me being different. I think they just recognized me as the same because I was behaving like them or like talking the same language. They didn't judge me by my appearance. I was just like always trying to blend in and act like the other kids are acting, and I wasn't bullied back then in elementary school, I think. I
mean, you did say, oh, well, what, is this you swimming?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, you're a swimmer.
I was. You were? I mean, I did synchronized swimming, artistic swimming.
Oh, that feels very Russian. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's very Russian.
Okay. Yeah. Was it your parents like, hey, you should try synchronized swimming? Or?
I was doing like just competitive swimming, and then I got scouted.
Do you feel like there's anything that because you were Russian you wanted to try?
Oh, I think definitely it was a part of my motivation to do it.
Was it like ロシア人だからやってみないとみたいな感じ？
なんかシンクロやってるよって言うと、あ、すごいロシア人らしいねそれみたいな。
Actually, when I was growing up in the U.S., around age 17, I was going to try Taekwondo, you know, and then my friend was like, Max, you're Japanese though, you should do karate. and then I was like, you're right. So I did karate instead, and I mean, that's a whole different story for me, but I understand. I think because you are maybe your roots are maybe something else that you want to try to be both, right?
So
because you grew up as Japanese in Japan, so I can understand like I'll try to be Russian for a bit. But
yeah, it's the same for me. Like I was trying to do both Russian and Japanese.
Did you have half Japanese friends too, and did you relate with them because they were kind of also bicultural?
Yes, I think I did, because if they're half, like they have parents from both countries, so they can like easily be exposed to both cultures at home. But me, ちょっと難しいな。
Maybe I should ask a different question. So you were born and raised in Japan and went to Japanese school all the way until, I mean, even high school was Japanese, but up until that time, obviously it makes sense if you're very connected to Japan because that's where you're from. Did you feel like you also identified with being Russian?
I like, if people ask me which are you, like more Japanese or more Russian, I would say I'm more Japanese. なんか日本語喋れるって分かったら、もう相手の人が日本語喋れるって分かった瞬間にもうすぐ日本語にスイッチしたりとか、もう日本語の方が喋っててコンフォータブルだし、結構もういろんなカルチャーの視点から見て食べ物とか言語とか、なんか伝統とかも全部日本の方が自分に馴染みがある。なんか一番安心する、周りにあると。だから海外に住んだことないし、なんかやっぱり 日本を出るのは寂しい。日本がすごい心地いいから。
そうね。まあでもそれがなんか当たり前のことだと思うんだけど、やっぱ家庭ではでも日本語も使ってた？
日本語も使ってたし、すごいミックスで、ロシア語日本語ミックスするんだけど、もう自分の家で勝手に言葉作ってたりしてた。なんか動詞、どっちも動詞組み合わせて新しいなんか単語を生み出したりとか、例えば Let's go hang out っていう時は、Пошли особиться。Like, 遊びって入れてるんだけど、
もう一回
Пошли особиться. So we had our own language at home. And my parents didn't restrict us. They weren't like, oh, speak Russian at home. Just like chill, like 何でもいいよ.
In this podcast, we are using a lot of Japanese, and I do know a lot of people that watch this podcast like to learn about Japan and also pick up some Japanese while they watch. So I did want to tell a little story about how I learned Japanese. Spoiler alert, I don't know if anyone knew this, but I am mixed Japanese, but I did have to learn a lot on my own. One of the ways that I actually did learn Japanese was I would watch some of my favorite shows on Netflix, TV, anime, and what I would do was I put on the Japanese captions so that I could actually read what was being said, and I could also take my notes app on my phone and then write down the actual Japanese that was coming on screen. It did have its problems though, because in order to write down the actual Japanese, I had to hear perfectly what was being said. While this method did actually work for me to study Japanese, I found out that there's a really good tool out there that makes this process much easier, and it's actually today's sponsor, which is LingoPie. LingoPie is what could be called the Netflix of language learning. It's a service that helps aid language learners to further improve whatever language they're working on. You can learn languages with authentic TV shows, movies, music, audiobooks, and podcasts. They offer 9 languages and 3,000 shows and movies. My favorite feature of all of this, though, is that there's actually a Google Chrome plugin where you can link it to your Netflix account and turn every single one of your favorite shows into a language learning session. You can watch your favorite shows, and the captions and translations will display on the right sidebar, and it works seamlessly. Currently, LingoPie offers a 7-day free trial, and if you use my special code, which is here, you can get a special discount of 70% off of their lifetime plan. So if you wanted to get started on your language learning journey, take advantage of this plan and get started today with LingoPie. 自分が日本人って言うんだっけ? Do you call yourself Japanese?
I say I'm from Japan. Like, I always don't know what to say. How to explain. Like, I am from Japan, but I'm not Japanese.
It's funny that you say like that's how you say that, because I feel that's like a very Japanese style response.
主張が
相手をなんか気にしてるみたいな。
そう、すごい気にするし、主張が弱い。なんか、あんまりなんか目立ちたくないし、とりあえずなんか。
すごい。それがすごい日本人っぽいって言うと。
なんか日本人よりも日本人って言われる。喋り方。仕草も全部日本人っぽいって言われるから、自分では気づかないけど、人にすごい言われる。
Do you have any specific stories from childhood where you realized like, oh, I don't look like everybody else? Or is there some moment where you were like, oh, I wish I looked Japanese?
I did. Middle school and high school. Like I was trying so hard to be like everybody else. Like I even dyed my hair black once. And
oh, you did?
I did. I dyed my hair black.
Did it look good?
No. I had bangs, like really heavy, like this kind of bangs. Right. Short hair, like really Japanese style looking. But when I entered university, Temple, like it's like really multicultural, and I realized that there's so many beauty standards, but I was only influenced by Japanese beauty standards. Like I thought being skinny was pretty, pale skin, like people always complimented me, oh, you have such like white skin, 肌白いねとか足細いねとか. I thought it was how I was supposed to be beautiful, but now I realize that there are so many beauty standards for every race, every cultures.
When you entered Temple, or was it before that? Or
when I entered Temple.
Because you were still also learning English during high school. I guess you kind of picked up on American culture as well. I know you said Mean Girls was one of your favorite movies. Yeah. Did you learn English from Mean Girls?
Not only Mean Girls, but I got my Netflix account because I wanted to watch Gossip Girls.
Oh,
like
okay.
It's like really akogare. Like Japanese girls envy those kind of like American high school life. I was one of them.
You're one of them. Oh, you did mention it's like there's a word for it in Japanese, which is gaikoku kabure
Kaigai kabure, gaikoku kabure.
Kaigai kabure joshi, which is like a girl that wears the foreigner look, I guess.
Yeah. Looking more like Western girls, grow out their bangs, wear just a little bit heavy makeup, or like tan skin. Yeah.
Is there an example of an actress or model that people wanted to be like?
I've heard many girls were obsessed with Victoria's Secret models, like Miranda Kerr. She was famous in Japan, like she was starring at many TV commercials too.
Was this good for you because people have told you look like Miranda Kerr? Or?
Yeah, but I didn't know how to feel about it. Like, oh, you look like them, you look like...
Then one might just be like, you're
maybe
like,
because I'm just white.
That's exactly what it is. I know. Yeah. You're like, I don't know if you're saying this just because I'm white. Yeah, anyway, so, speaking of curriculum in Japan, how does Japan teach about Russia? I mean, in the US, it's definitely kind of like, oh, Russia did a lot of sus stuff, and Russia's always the bad guys in movies.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how that makes...
I think it's the same for Japanese people. They have the kind of the same image. First of all, because Japanese people don't really learn about Russia other than those history classes or movies, like Russians are spies, like they're always bad guys, enemies. Like history classes, it's always like negative things that are written in Japanese textbooks. And I also, like, I was talking with my parents. When I was young, we had to read our textbooks out loud as a homework at home. And I was reading the textbooks about wars, histories between Japan and Russia. And my parents were like, that's not true. Like, they were missing so many parts of what actually happened. And I realized that Japanese textbooks are like nationally designated. It has to be published by the government.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Kokute kyokasho. All the kids in Japan, they use the same textbooks. I think they have really limited information about Russia.
Something I've thought about Japan is somebody has to turn documents or articles or papers into Japanese, and that's how the information gets spread around. Whereas if you speak English, there's so much information written in English. So there's way more information that can be read or discovered. But Japan, since there's only Japanese, everything is limited to, funneled down to what is written in Japanese. And in this case, it sounds like they have a very one-sided view of Russia.
Yeah, I think so. Like, it's not only about Russia. Like, I've heard about Korea, South Korea too, or China.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Like people from there talk about the same thing, that Japanese textbooks miss out so many information.
That would make sense.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about the classes we have, like special education we have in Yokohama City. My mom teaches elementary school kids. It's called Kokusai Rikai, like international understanding. Yes. So people from many countries, they teach their cultures in English to kids. So they can learn English and cultures at the same time from people that are actually familiar with their cultures.
And that's called Kokusai Rikai at Yokohama School, or is that a
Shogakko? It's elementary schools.
Wow.
It's like required for every schools.
Every school?
Every school in elementary school.
I did not know that. That's very impressive. That's kind of a step forward in understanding about getting information and teaching from multiple angles.
I wish I had that when I was younger, so people would know more than just the history.
Yeah, so Russian history wasn't taught in a very nice light, but it wasn't like the students treated you bad because you're Russian.
Not exactly. Like, but
Why, you're laughing now.
About those history classes, like after those classes, kids were like, ロシアの殺し屋、恐ろしや。
ロシアの殺し屋、恐ろしや. That translates to
like basically like killers.
Russians are the killers.
Killers. Or they were like, give us back our land, kind of stuff.
What? Oh wait, did Russia take land from Japan? Like Hokkaido?
Yeah. Hokkoryodo, it's like north.
Wait, so they were like, give us back our land.
Yeah.
Like jokingly to you or something?
Yeah, and I was joking about it too. Oh, I'll tell Putin later. Like I was joking about it too.
プーティンに電話してくる。
そう。なんかあんまり
Yeah.
I didn't take it seriously.
So we talked a little bit about you going into temple and kind of realizing, oh, there's different beauty standards and things like that when you started realizing that there's people from all around the world and everyone looks different. I wanted to talk just a little bit about recently Miss Japan was a Ukrainian born nationalized citizen. So she's Japanese by nationality. She was, I think, raised in Japan since like age 5. She won, and then there's controversy of why a Ukrainian woman won Miss Japan. Do you have any thoughts on that? Beauty pageants already are kind of annoying to me, but let's talk about it just a little bit.
For me, I don't think I wouldn't do it if I was her, because
you mean you wouldn't go in the contest?
Yes, I wouldn't, because even though I was born and grew up here, I still recognize myself as like, how do I say? 難しいな。I think it's a contest for like beauty, appearance wise, and that's the biggest part. So if you look completely different, I don't think it's fair. Or like, I also heard that she applied for the Japanese citizenship a year before she was going to the contest. So I don't know if she's like genuinely like Japanese. She speaks Japanese though. But
it's very touchy. I know this is hard to say. I would say my opinion is she's obviously, we understand now, people like you who are born and raised here outside may not look Japanese, but really, you know, you're from here. It's not strange to say like I'm Japanese. It shouldn't be, but looks and ethnicity, you're obviously not Japanese, you're Russian. It would be the same way if a Chinese American was born in America and they want to say like I'm ethnically Chinese. However, if America has a beauty pageant, there's understood that it's a multicultural country and everyone can kind of win. I think Japan, I hate beauty pageants. It's so dumb. This is so dumb. I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. If Japan had if beauty pageants had it where maybe 10 people could win every year instead of one, it seems very fair that multiple Japanese people ethnically would win, and then maybe a couple people like her where it's like, oh, I'm raised in Japan and maybe identifies with Japanese culture more than anything.
Yeah.
It's okay to have her and then maybe a couple half Japanese people to show, okay, this is Japan. I think because it's only one person at a time, people have a lot of opinions about this. Complex.
It's complex, yeah. First of all, like beauty standards are so different. If that person identifies as Japanese, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But if it was me, I wouldn't do it because I would care about what people think about me. Like, oh, it's not fair. I don't think I can take all this like hate comments about me.
Okay, I just wanted to hear like I felt like it was very topical since she's Ukrainian, you're Russian, and
very controversial.
Anyway, moving on from that topic, you mentioned to me also though, because now you do speak English, that one thing you enjoy about English language or culture is the humor and the jokes and meme culture even, and it's kind of hard to, because Japanese humor and humor in the West is very different. Did you watch like Japanese comedy TV shows growing up?
I did. Like I watched Japanese TV. Like I also watched cartoons. Like what people usually watch, I watched everything like growing up. But one thing about those comedy TV shows, like I didn't get the humor really
ever
much.
Zuto?
like sometimes I've heard like one Western comedian in Japan, he was talking about the differences of humor. Like in Japan, it's like really bakabakashi.
Like
people get naked, like
yeah,
that kind of humor. Ippatsu gyagu toka.
Slapstick. This is what you might call slapstick humor. Like
slapstick?
Yeah, slapstick comedy is basically pain comedy, get naked, kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And maybe Western is a little more like sarcastic, and I don't think I have to explain it.
but yeah, like I'm more into the sarcastic like humor and like memes and everything. And after I graduated high school, I met people who speak English, and I was like it was really new and fun to me sharing those like sarcasm humors.
Yeah, that's actually amazing that memes can bring people together.
Meme jokes. It does.
I guess this kind of brings me to my next point about, relating to Japanese people or Western people a little bit. I did want to talk a little bit about dating in Japan. Have you dated any Japanese guys in the past? Like full, like Jinjapa or full Japanese?
Yes.
Was it hard to relate, or obviously you are Japanese, so like you can talk and speak to them, but
it was more hard for me to have a relationship or date someone from other cultures. I never had the experience. I only like met people who grew up in Japan. So language-wise, culture-wise, it was really comfortable with someone who grew up in the same environment. I see people struggling like in relationships with different languages and cultures, like love language. Like it's really different, I feel like.
Now, you're dating somebody who's kind of similar to your background, right?
Yes, really similar. He was born in Japan. He grew up in Japan like me, but he has a Brazilian dad and a Russian mom. So he's more multicultural than me, and he speaks 5 languages.
5 languages? Do you joke about that though?
Yeah.
Like you're more multicultural.
Yeah.
You win. I also joke about this, that being bilingual is not enough anymore. It's not cool anymore. You have to be at least trilingual. And now he's like 5. Is that because Brazilian? I've heard that Brazilian is very similar to Spanish and Italian.
Yeah. He speaks Spanish a little bit too.
Okay. But do you think you can relate more with him than because of his background?
Definitely. Like, we were friends before we got into a relationship, and...
Oh, wow. He got out of the friend zone.
Yeah, he did. He did. Yeah, we had so much in common. Different languages there. Like, I think I change personalities when I speak each language. And we can talk about a lot of things in different languages. It's really fun.
How would you describe your personality in each language?
In English, it's more neutral. I feel like I can be more open-minded, like more casual in English. But in Japanese, 日本語だとなんかすごいかしこまったりとか、なんか敬語使ったりとか、ちょっとなんて言うんだろう、シャイとか陰キャな感じに。だから日本人と話すときと、その英語喋れる人と話すときと、すごいもう関わり方が全く違ってくる。やっぱ日本語喋れる人だと敬語で入るのが当たり前って思ってたりとか。Russian, in Russian, I feel more badass. Like badass.
It seems
like,
the Russian way.
The accent itself, maybe. It's like more hard, the way I speak it. Like when we argue at home, we use Russian because it's like more intense.
It's just like a choice. Okay, we're switching to Russian now. Maybe that's why Russians are the bad guys in movies, because it just sounds way cooler, more badass. Yeah. I feel like the impression of Russian is just like, it sounds like you're tough. The jokes on. Have you seen the memes about Russia, and some guy might be like punching a tree, and then there's a bear in the background, and then they're like, just a normal Tuesday in Russia.
Yeah, like people are tough physically, mentally. They're tough, I think.
Is it true? Can you do can you do martial arts? I know you're into fitness. So
yeah,
we could talk a little bit about that because you work out a lot. Can you talk a little bit about fitness in Japan? Because I know this is a little bit of a different topic, but I think it's still interesting because America, at least where I'm from, has a strong fitness culture compared to Japan. And of course, on the internet as well, there's a lot of fitness influencers. What can you talk about here? When did you start training?
2 years ago, I started going to the gym. First of all, at the gym, you never see a lot of girls. It's always a lot of men. And if I see a girl, they're on like a treadmill. I think it's related to the beauty standards again. People want to be more skinny and they do cardio a lot. But I see sometimes girls do lifting and I can tell they are doing that for like a contest or like really competitive weightlifting, like tanned muscles, like muscle mummies at gyms. Like, but I don't feel like people do it for like a hobby or fun.
Are you trying to do competitions or are you just
I don't. I want to be more focused on health, wellness, like physically, mentally.
Yeah.
But I really hope that more girls get into it and I have like a workout girlies, buddies. I wish I could socialize at the gyms, but it's a solo activity, like you said. I want to experience the overseas gym environment.
So this is my last question. Do you think you want to stay in Japan long term or do you want to move abroad at some point? How do you feel about that?
I'm definitely more comfortable in Japan, living in Japan, because I never lived anywhere else. But I definitely want to experience new environments, people. I know it's going to be hard, like getting used to other places because I never experienced it. If I had to choose between Russia and Japan, like I would definitely choose Japan because like we have seasons, like it's really fun. Like
oh yeah.
In Russia, it's always been like a little bit dark, like cloudy, rainy, snowy. I definitely want to move to a country where it's like sunny beaches. People always like joke about how I'm Russian and grew up in Niigata where it snows a lot. And I'm still being a summer girl. Like I'm not used to cold still. As I said, I'm kaigai kabere. So like I'm really interested in living like west coast of the state.
Okay,
like,
I thought you were gonna say Hawaii. I was like, that's very Japanese to say.
Yeah, it's
Hawaii.
really Japanese. I've heard it's really like everything. Like you see Japanese everywhere in Hawaii. So
Hawaii, the first time I was like, why is everything in Japanese? This is great. I called it second Japan because it's an island. There's Japanese everywhere.
I hope after this interview I can meet more people like me who are like interested in knowing me so we can talk about a lot of stuff. I'm interested in other cultures, other people's backgrounds. So yeah.
Anyway, guys, thanks for listening to this podcast. Thanks, Victoria, for being here. ありがとうございます。ありがとうございました。Thank you. ありがとうございました。ありがとうございました。大丈夫。I'm sweating. Sweating? やばい。緊張してた。